So this is more like a hands-on, yes, how to do things or solutions today, tools for developers. Welcome.
Thank you. I mean, we're going to talk a lot about infrastructure, and one of the things that I'm very interested about is these hardware wallets like Trezor, and what we're trying to do is to let people have a vision of what a hardware wallet is like that for zero cost. So, for example, everybody has an old Android phone that's on the drawer, or they gave it to someone else. And there are billions of Android phones out there. So the idea is to build an app. I mean, you just go to your phone, your old phone, and you wipe it out clean. You install this app, and it will just create the signature, just like the Trezor does. Create a signature, and also you give it to the app one address that you control outside of that Trezor, so that we'll be sending. So you're gonna press airplane mode forever, okay? So we'll be sending notifications to this app all the time. So if this app ever goes on the internet for any reason at all, the first thing it does is send all the Bitcoin, wipe it clean, send all the Bitcoin to this other address that you had. And the idea is that the communication, will be done completely by QR codes. So you have a payment to do, and so you get this payment from a QR code, and then you sign it in the phone, and in the airplane mode phone, and then the signature, the transaction, it becomes a QR code, and then you propagate it to the network through a QR code. You give it to a computer that's online, and through a QR code you do this thing. So the basic idea is that, I mean, this is not a substitute for the Trezor. It's not at all a substitute for the Trezor. But it's the idea of having hundreds of millions of people checking out what something like Trezor or Ledger or hardware wallets or all these more advanced things are, and understanding them. So it's, instead of having us more paranoid about security, everybody can check it out. You have one link, you go there, you go to the Play Store, download this thing, you go to the App Store in Apple, download this thing, and then it's available to anybody at zero cost. We want to scale the idea of having these private keys separate from online machines. And a friend of mine is talking about, and then there's a whole lot more work involved. He's talking about recompiling Linux, recompiling Android, and taking off all the network functions. Just taking off all the network stack from the operating system. But then again, I mean, you have different phone models. You have different problems in that. But this is something that I think it's an interesting experiment, and it could be good for the overall community security, So I'll just pass it on to my colleagues.
Very interesting concept. It's mind-boggling how much is actually going on in the Bitcoin ecosystem. It's actually hard to keep track of. So I'm going to be talking about Bitcoin in a two-tier network. I'm Evan Duffield. I'm a software engineer. I've been programming since I was 15. And as a little bit of background, I'm really interested in finance, economics, machine learning, and these types of things. So when I got into Bitcoin, it was just fascinating. It captivated my interest. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to tinker with Bitcoin at like a really low level. I wanted to mess with the protocol. And I wanted to test things that you really can only do with your own currency. And so what we've been doing is really adventurous things that, you know, you could just never get into the Bitcoin project because they're just too dangerous. But with a small little network like this, you can do things because we can be really nimble with what we do. And so what have we been doing? Some of the projects have been what we call a two-tier network, as opposed to a single-tier network on the Bitcoin network. And then decentralized funding and decentralized governance. So how does that work exactly? Well, if you think of Bitcoin like a job network, I would argue that it's actually the first truly decentralized job network. But there's only really one job, and it's mining currently. And so what we did was we added a new job. And we call these people masternode operators, and they run our infrastructure for us. And basically what we do is we require that they run specific types of hardware, and then we can actually rely on that hardware. So how has it been working for us? And I would say amazingly well. We've added hundreds of these master nodes, which are full nodes, which service the network over the past 12 months. We have 3,400 currently, and about 4,500 full nodes, as opposed to the Bitcoin network, which has about 5,800. And so we have a comparable infrastructure to the Bitcoin network, which is pretty amazing because we're about 1/400th of the size. So how do you run one of these master nodes on our network? Well, all you do is you buy some coins. These nodes are collateralized, which means that they can't be faked. And all you do then is you configure your full node, and then you join the second tier. And you get paid, so you get compensated, and you use that money to pay for the cost of the server. And the neat thing about a collateralized second tier is you can do really cool things. Based off of that collateral, there's 1,000 dash, and that has a public key. And the public key has a private key, which you only know. So you can sign messages to the network. We have a secure communication protocol on the second tier, and we implemented decentralized voting with that. With the decentralized voting,
Sorry, can you switch microphones because that one is not working? And we really want the audio to get recorded.
yeah, it is on. Okay, so with the second tier, we have a collateralized full node network. There we go, that's a lot better. Now I can hear it. And basically, we have thousands of these full nodes, and each of them have 1,000 dash collateral tied to them. That collateral has a public key and a private key. And so the public key is known by the network. The private key is only known by the person running that full node, which is ran as a master node. So what do you do with this? And you can do interesting things such as implementing decentralized voting. So imagine thousands of these collateralized nodes voting on topics on the network. And then you can do even more interesting things, like you can build decentralized funding. So what if you allocate a piece of the block reward, and then you have people that are running these nodes voting on where to send the money to? And so you can propose things to the network and get them paid. And then you can also govern the network, and you can answer questions pretty much instantaneously about what direction that the network should go in. So here's our decentralized governance and funding system. And we've only had this for 3 months now. And over the 3 months, we've funded 3 different conferences, one in Mexico, one in Florida, and one in the Netherlands. And it actually paid for our airfare, paid for the hotels, and things like that, because the people that are promoting the currency or doing work for it shouldn't have to bear the cost of doing it themselves. And this stuff is actually paid directly from the blockchain. Also, we bought a new website, dash.org, from the blockchain itself. I think it's actually the first domain to ever be purchased directly from the blockchain. And we fund our business development with this method. So how could you apply something like this to Bitcoin? Well, I think first you've got to imagine what makes the perfect Bitcoin. And I don't know the answer to how the Bitcoin developers or the community would want to use this technology, but I just want to open a conversation about, what would it be like if they had decentralized funding and decentralized governance? It could be pretty neat. There's definitely an issue with the full node relationship and the transaction volume that the network is doing. As transaction volumes rise, the full nodes actually fall off. And with a second tier, you automatically fix this issue. So then what else do you get? We want to scale the Bitcoin ecosystem, and we want to be able to support millions of mobile devices. So I've come up with a couple strategies of doing this with a two-tier network. So you want to support millions of these mobile devices, and you could actually do it with a decentralized SPV installation. What if you had all of the second-tier nodes running SPV, and then you point a round-robin DNS at this second tier? And then now you have thousands of them bearing the load of the entire network. And then you could also have decentralized funding like we're using, or decentralized governance. You could probably even implement Bitcoin Lightning in a similar fashion. I was also thinking about governance. What if you proposed the BIPs to the network via the second tier and had them vote on them? So then we would have an instantaneous way of telling how the network feels about individual proposals. And this could be, it's Sybil-proof because the second tier is collateralized, it's instantaneous, and then the network has immediate direction that it can go in. They could also have a funding system like we have, and they could actually pay for the core development directly from the blockchain. Currently, it's financed by grant money, and it used to be financed by donations and from a foundation. So I could see this as being a vast improvement. Here's the decentralized SPV idea. All you do is you point that round-robin DNS at the second tier, and then you have the mobile wallets point at the second tier. And then it should scale because it's thousands of servers. So how would they do this? And I don't really know. They would have to plan and implement it. And these are some of the smartest people I've ever met, so I'm sure they could do an amazing job. It does require that part of the block reward gets allocated for the second tier so that it compensates them. And it requires that part of the block reward would get allocated to decentralized funding as well. And then you trustlessly detect and you pay the master nodes that are on the system, and then you should be able to scale rather efficiently. So what's the conclusion? I would say that we should start talking about this and see what the Bitcoin community thinks about adopting something like this on the Bitcoin network. As a short announcement, we're open sourcing Dash Evolution today, which it's basically what I've been talking about times 100. We want to implement something like a decentralized PayPal on top of our decentralized currency, where you could basically log into your mobile wallet, and then it would connect to the second tier. We would store all of the needed information that you use on the second tier encrypted, such as friends lists and things like that. So I could friend somebody. I would send them, 5 of my next public keys to use. They would send me 5 of their next public keys. And I could literally just click their name, click, I want to send you to Dash, and then click send. And I think that's a pretty powerful feature if it's completely network-wide. And that's the type of stuff that we're building into Dash Evolution. So if you're interested in that, go to dashevolution.com and check out the new papers. And that's it. Thanks a lot.
Good afternoon. My name is Ruiz Molina. I'm coming from Argentina along with the other guys. And I'm going to introduce you to a new project which we've been working for 1.5 years. And I'm going to give you a small overview because we don't have much time to talk about it. Let me see if this could work. I believe that is not in full. I cannot get to see the whole thing. Okay. We basically analyzed before getting started with our project what was the status of the ecosystem, understanding that Bitcoin, we can see that is a peer-to-peer network plus a standalone wallet, and by itself, the peer-to-peer network, since it is open source and decentralized, it is then resistant to censorship. Then we have the standalone wallet that is also open source, taking the keys of users, and that would not require third-party reliability and resistant to censorship because of that. So the ecosystem for the onset would be censorship resistant. And what happened? The standalone wallet then evolved in a wallets ecosystem where on the one hand, as you can see here on this chart, the funds, the investment, the startups in this ecosystem went to the service areas that were centralizing. So it was once again translated into trust into the system and the need of trusting in third parties. And the standalone wallet was delayed with not much fund. And these wallet services existed or unfolded like this because we had many problems, because we wanted different solutions like the communication, the sync between wallets. For instance, how to avoid that if you lose your cell phone, the Bitcoins won't disappear. A series of problems that made sense to get solved, but since they were difficult to technically program in a decentralized manner, they were centralized. But these decentralized services are not resistant to censorship as the ecosystem was at the beginning. In addition to that, the ecosystem of Bitcoins evolved in general, adding up new ecosystems like the exchange that are not censorship resistant, like payment processors, and in general terms we can say that the ecosystem is not censorship resistant. That would be the basis of our thought. So what is Fermat? Fermat is an open source project made by its own peer-to-peer network. The functionality of the network is to interconnect the mobile devices, allowing them to exchange metadata. And it is mounted on the cryptocurrency protocols underneath, but basically that would be the add of a peer-to-peer network to transfer the interconnection of mobiles, and a framework that we are going to see is replacing the standalone wallet, making it evolve in a framework in order to have distributed applications. So the Fermat is an open source and decentralized network, and we have here the handling of this plugin framework, and it is censorship resistant. So the Fermat ecosystem is censorship resistant, and Bitcoin plus Fermat and any application would be censorship resistant. That is our focus in order to understand the concept in a simpler way. A device is communicating to with another one, executing any sort of financial application. The security would travel through Bitcoin, and the value given, like maybe a ticket or something, would travel through Fermat network. And supplementing one thing to the other, the application is 100% distributed and censorship resistant without depending upon third parties. The way in which we created the system was in such a way that it's going to be an extension of the operating system. We can see that in the first screen, the Fermat icon opening a second screen, and it would be like if we were inside the operative system. And a third screen, we can get to see the execution environment in order to run applications that are financially distributed, and that would be like generic ones. So basically, this would be the framework, the evolution of the standard wallet. We made it evolve a little bit, and then it ended up being a framework. Then we went for a plug-in architecture because our objective was that we could program plugins to reuse with a high module character. So any application on the framework would add and incorporate the infrastructure with a certain amount of plugins, and then the next ones could then start reusing. But we are basing on the concept and the success case of WordPress. The great success that they have is that people are allowed, even though they are not developers, to create professional websites. So we wanted to take the framework up to that point. The framework has a layer architecture, and the layers that are on top are graphics. So that's the full stack, where we have the crypto network below and the decentralization on top. So we wanted to take it to the WordPress level, where we could not only program those components, but getting to the point in which we may create applications equivalent to websites in a programmable fashion. And I'm going to show you how to do that. And we built everything in a portable way. Of course, we used Java. We have the layer that is at the bottom that would be integrated to another operating system, but the rest would be portable. On the other hand, we decided that the framework would handle the complexity accessing to crypto network and the digital assets, so the applications on top would easily have the services of the crypto network or issuing the digital assets. And this is what I was just explaining. We based ourselves on the WordPress model, and it is if you were running the server of WordPress in your telephone. So the plugins would be there, so you can talk to a counterpart through the peer-to-peer metadata transfer. We build a lot of infrastructure for this, our own wallet factory, where the applications would be created in the telephone itself. We built a wall store where you would download these applications, these financial applications, but the wall store would be distributing. It could only be downloaded in some phones, and the idea is to avoid censorship in every way. This is the architecture at the wallet level, and for you to see it in a simplified manner, we have an architecture per layers where the plugins would be embedding according to the type of plugin. And the first layer, that is the reference wallet. Those are graphic interfaces, but plugins, because an application running in Fermat is not a standalone application. It is a set of plugins with a certain graphic interface. Another application would be another set of plugins, maybe reusing one of the ones already made. So the more plugins, more reusing. And the graphic interface is moderated in several layers, and we are using 3. The first one would be for what we are calling reference wallet, where every wallet or every financial application would be tackling a use in particular. The second layer would be the applications that combine some reference wallets, reusing the structures of plugin downwards. And the third layer would be when we are reaching the WordPress level. That's when you can get someone that is not a developer and changing the navigation or the graphic interface equivalent to WordPress, giving a wallet, for instance, for Burger King or McDonald's, where only we had a change in the look and feel. And the fourth level of all of this would be when Fermat running in your mobile device would give services as if it were a backend running in your device to the rest of applications running in the telephone, decentralizing any other thing installed. The system itself, and this is an overview of the system, and I'm going to zoom in. We built a philosophy of master plan. I don't know if we have that in the system, but it is modeled as the master plans of urban development. What? I have 5 minutes left? Okay. So these are the plugins. We are creating the first 400 in order to get started. And let me tell you very briefly about 2 use cases that were part of my explanation. The crypto broker platform, specifically a wallet for the broker that is devoted to buy Bitcoin and the customer that is devoted to eventually buying some Bitcoins. So we have a specific wallet to the broker for managing the business and the customer, allowing to find other brokers and establishing negotiation. And then the execution of the agreement, everything would be within the application without requiring WhatsApp or other media. Another use case would be with what we call crypto distribution network. We create a wallet. This is according to the model of distribution and prepaid when we have a credit and a distribution network and a recall point. We want a wallet, but in this case for cryptocurrency with the distributors network and the recharge place, so you can go anywhere to get your credit, implementing that to the distribution existing networks. Let me tell you a little bit about the team, because I stated a bit, and we had our first round, and we had 200 subscribers. I took them all to Europe. And we had a very interesting thing, because when I was going to pay salary, I offered to participate in the companies, and they preferred the stock ownership instead of dollars. So we had our associates established, and my budget was not spent. Then I could use it to hire more people who are receiving that same deal. And after a month, we were 10, and now we are 35 people working full-time, more than 20 developers, and we are all partners, fully motivated and pushing forward. This is our startup. It's called Bit2Buy. Let me tell you the story, because I learned about Bitcoins in 2013. I was in the middle of a project, and I was devoted to have architectonic elements for the Arabic culture.
For developing non-periodical geometric patterns, and that's very appealing for the Arabic culture, so I wanted to open a factory for that. I learned about Bitcoin, and it was immediately appealing to me. Over 1 year, I was not able to get involved, and something funny happened. When I wanted to change to Bitcoin, first thing I thought was to have an exchange in Dubai. It made a lot of sense, because Dubai is having a good reputation. So I said I can get a partner in Dubai, and if I'm successful, I can have others do business here. I established contacts, and then I had a business meeting with a person in Dubai. The Sheikh tells me, he joined me with an advisor, and I explained Bitcoin to him. I said that he had to invest $400,000. Okay, I'm about to finish. Okay, so when I finished telling this story, the Sheikh said he didn't understand anything about Bitcoin, But he asks the Englishman if he had understood. Well, he says yes. Well, I didn't understand either, but I will put $200,000 of my own. When I saw the business card of the sheikh, he asked me to explain him what my business card read, and because it has a similar logo, it had the Arabic word, and I said that it meant inception in Arabic, but he said, "Do you know what will this mean if I add one dot here?" And he said, "Well, if I add a dot here, it would read Bitcoin." And I said, "No, he's taking me for a fool. Can you just imagine how possible that is?" So I said, "Well, goodbye. Next day, I'm going to the factory." And then I add a dot to the business card, and all of them said, "Well, it reads a Bitcoin." And I said, "No way." And then I called my partner and I said, "Guys, I'm quitting. I'm switching gears." So that's the start of my history with Bitcoin. The word there reads Bitcoin. The red dot there is the one that was missed.
Hello, my name is Ira Miller, and I am the former co-founder and CEO of Coinapult. Sold the company earlier this year, though it's still around and doing quite well. Since then, I co-founded 2 more projects, my new software development company, Deginner, and the Founder Institute chapter in Panama City. Founder Institute is an entrepreneur incubator. As you can tell, co-founder of this, co-founder of that, I'm a big fan of collaboration. And I think, Diego, in your presentation, you emphasize the importance of collaboration in this ecosystem, because it's not, we are all connected, whether we like to admit it or not. Though at my company, Deginner, we develop open source tools for other developers, that is not the primary topic I want to talk about today. Our tools are just modular pieces of a Bitcoin business or a cryptocurrency business. So we built an authentication layer, a framework for applications, for trustless applications. We have a multi-signature wallet, which is based on Bitcore, another excellent open source project. Soon we're going to be releasing a open source exchange node, which does over 1,000 trades a second, is based on Redis and AMQP, all open source technologies. But those are just tools. If you're interested in those, please check out our website, Deginner.com, or talk to me after. But what I want to talk about today is how to make a sustainable development project. If you make an open source project, there are many advantages to it. Obviously, it's better for other engineers to use. It can be trustless. Your users don't have to trust you nearly as much, trust what you wrote into the code, or that you are not doing something bad with their information or their funds. But on the other hand, there's a real challenge with open source projects. These advantages are counterweighted by loss of control. And in particular, this loss of control is a problem for the business model. And I think this came out also in Luis's presentation. He had a slide, the wallet funding. The more centralized you were, the more funding you get. It's not just wallets, that's every business.
Yes, in all the other sides of the ecosystem.
Exactly, yeah. All over the ecosystem, it's the same story. The more centralized you are, the easier it is for you to monetize, the more likely you are to get funding, the more help you will get in growing. But these aren't actually the best projects for the ecosystem. These are the projects that are not contributing back to the ecosystem, that are creating trusted systems, not trustless systems, which is what we all hope to achieve. And I'm not just pointing fingers. I created a trusted system as well in Coinapult. And I'm up here telling you about some of the mistakes I've made and the lessons I've learned from this endeavor. It's very tempting as a developer starting out a new project. Maybe you don't have a lot of business experience. you haven't presented to venture capitalists before. When the hard questions start coming in about business models and these things, you have a choice to make. You can stick to your core values, the features and characteristics that you think are the best for your platform, permissionless operations, trustless operations, these sorts of things. Or you can start to make sacrifices. You can start to change in order to accommodate a more centralized, more business-friendly model. I think that some of the problems we've seen as an ecosystem over the past 2 years, this bear market, have been caused by this fundamental misalignment of incentives between the developers who ideally would be making open source projects and the venture capitalists and the regulators and other parties who have come into the space and push everybody towards centralization. It may not seem like much, but you take your project, you incorporate it, you get funding. You're attaching strings. And once you have been operating this way for a couple of years, these strings, they start to guide you. You no longer have autonomy. And effectively, that's what happened to me with Coinapult. I realized that we'd built something centralized, which is very good. There are a number of companies in the space that are doing centralized things and contributing a lot. In particular, when you interface with the traditional financial system, it's necessary. But again, that's not the dream. That's not the promise of cryptocurrencies. So my main interest is to try to find a sustainable model for open source projects. How can an open source developer continue to do R&D without compromising these core values? And I think that this space is full of wonderful examples. Evan, the decentralized funding model that you built in the Dash is very fascinating, and I think that we should all study these things. On a slightly more centralized note, if you have a small team of people with a somewhat centralized projects, like most open source projects are, I think that there are a number of best practices out there that all developers should be aware of. And I put these best practices into a theoretical business model that I invite you all to try, and if it works for you, you make money, great, spread the word and refine it. The business model itself is open source. It's called Research and Develop Open Ventures for R&D of open source things. Essentially, the model is that once you've created an open source project, it's available for everyone to see. This is intellectual capital. You've made an upfront investment in intellectual capital, not, you haven't built a product, you haven't built a business yet. What you've made is a pool of intellectual capital. If you want to get a return on that investment, you need to invest your intellectual capital in the next generation of projects. You need to partner with people. And the way that we propose to do this is by creating an incubator where other projects, derivative projects, will apply to your incubator and say, we would like your help using your tools to build the next thing. And in return for this support and the initial intellectual capital investment in their project, they would provide revenue sharing or some kind of long-term return on your upfront investment. So that's the main model. The white paper is on rdov.co. We're planning to make a platform that will make it easier for people to do this, to plug in your GitHub account and start monetizing existing projects and things like that. But the main thing I want to encourage everyone, don't compromise, stick to open source, stick to trustless, permissionless systems, and you'll find a business model that works within that. Thank you.
Amazing, Ira. You wanted to say something quick,
just one quick comment. I am a professor at a business and economics institution in Brazil, and I found about Bitcoin as I was reading Slashdot at, this is, I think, October 2010, and I'm like reading the thing and finding it fascinating, and then going to the Wikipedia page, and then I said, oh shit, I gotta go to class. I had to teach PhD students. And then I invaded the class, like Gengis Khan, and I say, guys, stop everything. I found something interesting. And then I talked to them about Bitcoin. I didn't know anything about it. So it's like us trying to figure out what the slash.thread was talking about, us trying to figure out what the Wikipedia page was talking about, and you know, to borrow Winston Churchill's phrase, you know, looking where in the story of Bitcoin are we right now, looking at all of this, and to borrow his phrase, I think we are reaching the end of the beginning. You know, we are reaching the end of a full-blown secure platform, and I think we will have reached the end. The beginning will have ended, and we will be going to a new phase as soon as we can scale, as soon as Bitcoin can scale. So that's my.
Okay. I will try to summarize, because all these are very high level or very complex ideas. But my remarks, and then I will give you the microphone to you so you can correct me or expand my assumptions. But well, even you have developed a consensus model, a governance model for a cryptocurrency, and an incentive model that is governed by that consensus model that you created. And I think that's amazing, and that's something Bitcoin is lacking in terms of giving incentives to full nodes that are the auditors of the network. So I think you're finding or trying to find a solution to a very big systemic risk of Bitcoin. So I think it's very, very interesting, very exciting to see what you have done. And that consensus also applied to the development and to the evolution of your own platform. So that's my summarizing of you, then you will expand on it. Alexandre, you were talking about doing a secure, like a cold storage using an old smartphone. Not smart, no, just an old phone.
Airplane mode phone.
Yeah, and a Nokia 1100, something like that. That's interesting. The hacker in me craves for it, and then I really like what you're doing, Luis. I think you are creating a layer. You're creating a layer on top of the cryptocurrencies layer. And I think this layered stack concept is growing everywhere. I mean, we are wondering that Bitcoin is just one layer, but we have to build, like in the OSI model, we have to build layers on top of it, whether it's Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, but stop trying to make Bitcoin do everything.
Exactly.
I mean, relying on Bitcoin for what it does well.
The ecosystem is growing from down, like in several layers of protocols.
Yes.
We started from the top down. Okay?
Exactly.
With the idea of a strong segmentation, that's why we build all this stuff with plugins.
Excellent.
So as to
let me summarize.
Yeah.
Then you will talk.
Okay.
I have the power now. So, as I was saying, I think what is exciting about you is your project is this concept of building a layer on top of the layers that exist and bringing more functionality. And I think you share with Ira this concept of bringing a framework. That's something we will see more and more happening. I mean, building frameworks so others can focus on the last layer, that is the one that interacts with users. So I think that's very interesting. I will dig deeper into your platform. I really like Fermat. And finally, what Ira is saying, I live it in my own flesh, because Rootstock is the kind of project that everybody wants, everybody loves, but it's difficult to fund, because I mean, the business model is a complex one. I mean, there is a business model, but it's a very complex one. So I think we have to find a solution to keep creating the tools that bring more value to the ecosystem, to the decentralized ecosystem, and find a way. So maybe, and that's maybe a long shot, but taking something of what Evan did and put it into what you're building, we can find a solution. So I think that's my summarizing. I hope it helps the ones that are not so technical, because I think it's difficult to grasp all these guys we're talking about. And now you have 30 seconds to wrap up, to correct me, to expand.
I'd like to use my 30 seconds to agree with you. I think we're all working on very similar things. We're all definitely working towards the same goals, and I'm very excited to. I didn't know about any of your. I've known about Dash a lot for a while, but I've learned a lot more, and I'm just excited to work more with you guys. We're making it happen. So.
It's it's been interesting meeting everybody because I've found the same project being ran by different people multiple times. So we're all after the same thing, just in completely different ways. And I think now is the time that you figure out the best possible way to do it, and then we follow that path. And I think that's really the end goal.
Yeah, I think we're reaching the end of the beginning where the infrastructure will be completely ready. And we're very, very close now. And it's still, this is something I used to talk, back in 2010, I mean, people thought I was talking about like Farmville money. And still, that's what the public thinks we're talking about. Farmville money, you know, we buy a new house for Farmville. They still don't understand the military-grade cryptography and the infrastructure that's being built silently over these years.
Okay, I agree with you. Basically, what we had in mind was to build something to enable a strong segmentation in order to give each possible user a custom tailored solution, and not done by ourselves, but letting other people, by reusing this component, to find niche of user interfaces or functionality that any segments in the world can use, basically. So we build from the top down until we find the protocols that we need down there. We find kind of an empty space in the ecosystem.
Okay, thank you very much. A big applause for the panel.